Afternoon. Today we are working on Po26. I can find a part, whole, or percent using an equation or proportion. So we're taking all this stuff that we have been learning and putting it into one objective. So it's not tons of new stuff. There is going to be an equation that we're going to learn that's going to make it easier. Okay, so we really need to pay attention. We have this objective, then we have our objective on Monday. So 27 will be on Monday. Then remember I said it's practice test Tuesday, real test Wednesday. So make sure that you are understanding all of these pieces. If there's an objective that you are like, ooh, I didn't quite get that one. I don't quite understand the increasing. That was one. I'm not the only one that saw the light filter, right?
I know.
Okay.
I thought it was an equation system.
So, okay, that was fun. Okay, back to the math. That's God just saying, hey, pay attention, be awake. All right, so if there is an objective you weren't sure on, make sure you're checking in with me because the test is next week. All right, so in every situation involving a percentage, there will be three components: the part, the whole, and a percent. The part is represented by writing a P. Part P. Makes sense. The whole is represented by the W. This is new stuff. We're taking everything we've learned and we're wrapping it up in a new way. So we really need to pay attention. So the whole is the W, and the percent, we use a percent sign. Okay? So part, whole, percent. In each example below, we're going to identify the part, the whole, and the percent. What's the easiest one to identify? Amala? The percent. So we're going to put the percent symbol underneath the 90%. Obviously, the percent symbol goes underneath the part that has the percent symbol in it. 90% is our percent. So that leaves us with the part and the whole. We don't need calculators right now, so they should not be out. So if we look at 72 is 90% of 80. Which one is the whole? Tessa?
The 80?
The 80. And then which one is the part? David?
72.
72. The part is always going to be smaller than the whole, right? When you have one whole, the part is less than it. If we have 80 of something, the part is going to be smaller. So your whole is the bigger number. It's one whole made up of smaller parts. So the whole is always the bigger number. So if we look at our next one, 16% of 30 is 4.8. What's the easiest one to label, Natalie?
16%.
16% is our percent. So 16% of 30 is 4.8. Which one is our whole? Hadley? 30. So that leaves 4.8 to be the part. 60% of the whole is the smaller part. We can word them differently. It's still the bigger number. 72 is 90% of 80. So notice how we say 16% of 30, 90% of 80. That whole is the big number that we are breaking up into smaller parts. LJ, I'm going to have you go to the side table. Thank you. So our last one, now we have fractions. All of a sudden it's not easy. Huh. So we're going to think back to what we know. We have 20 over 25 equals 80 over 100. We still have the part, the whole, and the percent. Oh, there's no percent sign. How do I figure out what the percent is? Harper?
Because 80 is out of 100, percent is out of 100, so.
Oh my goodness. Percent is out of 100. Remember, that's our magic number with percents. So if we have a fraction, it's over 100, that whole fraction is our percent. 80 over 100 is the percent. Then we have 20 over 25. Which one's our whole? Rocco? How did you know that, Rocco? The bigger number. The part is going to be smaller than the whole. Right? A part of the whole is going to be smaller. Those pieces make sense? Okay. So let's look at finding a part, whole, or percent can be set up in two different ways. We can do a proportion. We can do an equation. So if we're going to do the proportion, proportions are fractions. So we can set it up as part over the whole equals percent over 100. So just like that fraction we just saw, 20 over 25 was the part over the whole, 80 over 100 was that percent. 80 hundredth, this is the percent. Okay? We could also do it as an equation. So we say, and this is going to be important, you will want to put this equation on your help sheet. This is important. So you're going to want to put the proportion, and you're going to want to put that equation onto your help sheet. The equation is part equals percent times the whole. Eleanor, did you have a question?
I was just gonna ask if we could put it on help sheet before you said it.
So equations and formulas can always go on help sheets. So the equation, part equals percent times whole. I like to keep it simple and just write it that way. We know P is part, percent symbol is the percent, W is the whole. P equals percent times the whole. So we're going to see how to use these. So we're going to find the part, whole, or percent using both methods, because we need to understand both methods in order to decide which one we want to use. So we will use both methods, and shocker, show your work. So for my friends that did not get credit for the objective we corrected today because we did not show our work, I'm pointing out again, show your work. Okay, you cannot just use a calculator, put in your calculations in the calculator and write down an answer. You're actually going to show the work that you're doing to find that answer. So I'm going to erase this so I can scroll up. We're going to practice using both those methods. So what number is 35% of 70? How do you think I should write that proportion? Luke?
35% times 70.
Proportion, I said we're going to do first. So there are two different ways to do it. We're going to come back to your way when we do the equation method. Who thinks they know the proportion method? Claire? So think about what our proportion looked like. It was part over whole equals percent over 100. So how would I write that? It is a question, so we are going to have a question mark somewhere in there that we're going to solve for it. So what do you think is our question mark? So first, let's break this down. We need to figure out what is the part, the whole, and the percent. What would be the percent? Hadley? What would be our whole? Vivi?
70.
So what is our part? David?
The unknown number.
What number? So what are we gonna use when we set up our proportion? We're gonna use the P, because that's what we're searching for. We're searching for the part. So knowing that, those pieces, can we set up our proportion? Amala,
Yes.
can you walk me through it? What should I write?
P over 70.
Okay. Who thinks they know how to solve this? We know that when there's that equal sign, they are equivalent. They equal each other. It's equivalent. Do we know how to go from 70 to 100? How, Beckett? Because I'm really good at math. I love math. It's my jam. Not gonna lie. I have fun with math. But I don't know what to multiply 70 by to get to 100 off the top of my head. And Beckett is absolutely right. If we don't know what to multiply up for, the opposite operation is dividing. So instead of multiplying up, we can divide down. So 100 divided by 70 would be what? What is 100 divided by 70, Luke?
No, it isn't. It's like
So
1.7.
100 divided by 70, 1.42,
1.43. Yeah.
1.43.
If we're rounding.
Yep, and we need to round correctly. So we can't just assume, we know that 70 would have 1.7, and I see where you were coming from, so I'm glad this happened, because it's helping us learn. We can't just assume we know what it is. 100 divided by 70 is 1.43. So what do you think we have to do to find the P now? How do we find that part? Whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So if I divided 100 divided by 70 got me 1.43, how did I go from 70 up to 100? I multiplied by 1.43, but I don't know what my part is. So I'm going to do what? Divide or multiply? Hadley? 5. 35 divided by 1.43. What would 35 divided by 1.43 equal? Beckett?
24.4.
24.48. Do you see how we did that? We couldn't multiply up because as good as we are with our math, we just don't know. I don't think anybody in here would have guessed 1.43 is what we're multiplying by. But you figure out how we went from 70 to 100. You can do that division. Then we know what to do to the top. Now, Luke, we're going to use our equation. How should I set up my equation? Tell me the full equation. So I want an equal sign in it. So what's going to be on the left? Let me write our equation up here. Remember, it was part equals percent times whole. How should I set up my equation? So thinking up here, P was our question, percent is the 35%, whole is the 70.
We're still on that.
Yep, we're still on this one.
So, it's 35 times 70.
Which side of the equal sign should I put in?
So
35 times what?
70.
So is it 35? It's 35%. How do you think I should write that? Convert it to a decimal. Okay, that's gonna be a whole lot easier to work with if we convert it to that decimal. Because 35% is not 35. 35% is 0.35. So we need to make sure that we're converting it to that decimal. What else do I need to put in my equation? I'm missing something. Oop. Yeah. I'm searching for that part, so I'm just gonna write that P. P equals 0.35 times 70, because my final answer, I want to be that part. Eleanor?
So it is 24.5, but it kind of depends what spot we're rounding to.
So I've been telling us to round to
The
the hundredths place. So what is it if we're rounding to the hundredths place?
Well, if we round it to the 100th place, it would probably be 24.5.
Well, not probably. It's gonna be a definite. So what is 0.35 times 70?
Yeah, that's right.
So what is 0.35 times 70? What did you get?
24.5.
Okay, so if we get 24.5 and we're going to the hundredths place, what would we put in for the hundredths place?
A 0.
A 0. Okay, we don't change it. So if we're going out to that hundredths place, we know up top it was 24.48 because we were working with fractions. So think about what I told us when we were doing our math practice. Some people like to use 3.14 for pi. Some people like to use the pi button on the calculator that has a lot more decimals. So we get a slightly different answer. So 24.48, 24.5. I'm going to know when I make my answer key for the test, I will know what it is if we're doing the proportion. I will know what it is if we are doing the equation. So I'm going to accept the answer that goes with what form you did, because you're going to show your work. I'm going to know if you were rounding correctly. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Let's look at 48 is what percent of 120. Let's do our proportion way first. How? First thing we're going to do is you're going to tell me what is my parts, what is my percent, and what is my whole. Who can label them for me? Claire.
48 is your part. 120 is your whole. And then what percent is your percent?
Perfect. So we know what we're going to use to put into our proportion. So who can set up our proportion for me? Natalie.
48 over 120 equals percent over 100.
How do you think we should solve that? Graham? There's more to it than that. So what we want to do is we want to get the percent by itself. Right now, our percent is being divided by 100. If we want the percent by itself, remember that one-step operation, what do I have to do to get that percent by itself? If right now it's being divided, what's the opposite operation to get that percent alone? Claire? Multiply. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 100. So it's 100 times 48. Right? So those hundreds cross off because 100 divided by 100 is 1. So I get my percent by itself. So then we have 100 times 48 divided by 120. Does that make sense, Grant? What is 100 times 48 divided by 120, Grant? So would 40 be my answer? The question is what percent? I'm not just gonna write 40, I'm gonna write it as 40%. I need to have that label on there. Because if I just put 40, it doesn't mean the same thing as 40%. Okay, you have to have that percent sign on there. Does that make sense? All right, let's look at our equation way. We know what, we've labeled our parts, our percent, and our whole. How would I solve it with the equation? How do I set up my equation? Natalie?
48 equals percent times 100.
Opposite operations, I want to get the percent by itself. If this is multiplying, what do I have to do to get my percent by itself? Eleanor?
Change it to dividing.
Yeah, I'm going to divide. Instead of multiplying by 120, I'm going to divide both sides by 120. What is 48 divided by 120? Right? So 0.4 would be what percentage? Claire?
40%.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, let's do our next one. What is the, well, first let's label all the parts. 18 is 25% of what number? Amala, label them for me.
18 is the part, 25% is the percent, and what number is
So 18 is that part, 25% is the percent, of what number would be our whole. Of is kind of that key thing that we're looking for to know that it's talking about the whole. Of what number? That's the big part, the big whole number. How would I write that as a proportion? Claire?
18 over W is equal to 25 over 100.
How am I going to solve this one? Remember, using those opposite operations. What do you think, Eleanor?
18 multiplied by 25 and 100 multiplied by the whole number. Because opposite operations. So right now we're
So, the
25
18's
times-
on the top and 25's on the top, which is saying we're dividing. We want to get the W on the top.
Oh, so you're gonna multiply 18 by the W and 25 by 100?
We're going to multiply both sides by the W. So that gets us 18 equals 25W over 100. So if we want to do opposite here, we're going to flip it to multiplying it by 100 over 25. Because 25 and 25 cross off, 100 and 100 cross off. So now we have that W, we're left with our W, and we have 125 over 100 over 25 times our 18. What is 100 over 25? Vivi? 4. So that's the same as saying 4 times 18. What is 4 times 18, Rocco?
22.
You see why we flipped it? Because we wanted the W on top. So we had to flip this over to that side. So now we're going to do the equation. How do we set up our equation? Who can set up the equation way for me? Who?
18
So if I want W by itself, what do I have to do with that 25%? Remember, 25% is the same as saying 0.25. I like to convert it to that decimal because it's easier for me to use. I just, in the calculator, I like to put it in as a decimal. That's just the way my brain works. Okay, so I just convert it to that decimal right away. So if I have 0.25, and I have my part is 18, what do I have to do? Luke,
What, multiply them together?
what operation is happening right here? Remember that was, you said 25% times the W. We want the W by itself, and we're going to the opposite side of the equal sign. We have to do the opposite. We have to divide. So we're going to divide by 0.25. Because we want to do that opposite operation. What is 18 divided by 0.25? Claire?
72.
We get that same answer. Wait, what?
Oh, no.
Eleanor,
What's the point of dividing both sides if you don't use both sides?
what do you mean?
Like you're dividing both sides even though you don't need the 25.25.
I have to divide both sides, otherwise I'm left with 72 equals 0.25 W. I want that 0.25 out of there. So yeah, I do have to divide both sides. It is important to understand that because in the future, when we do more complicated math, and we will, some in the spring, definitely next year, you need to understand that we have to balance both sides of that equal sign. So it is important to understand that we have to get rid of that 0.25 away from that W. So we do have to divide it out. Because if we don't understand that concept, it's going to hurt us in the future. So we write it out as a way of it sinking into our brain that we are balancing both sides. Okay? All right. So on your second page, it says, most situations for which you will use these methods are real-life situations. Answer each question below, again, showing your work. Round your decimal answers. This time he's saying to the nearest tenth. So if you get a decimal answer, it says to round to the nearest tenth, although in his answer key, he does have some rounded to the hundredth. So I will have both answers. Mr. Schultz, he's a silly guy. But because he said in the directions round to the nearest tenth, on the test, if he says a specific decimal place, that's what I'm going to expect. Okay? So if the directions say to round to the tenth, I fully expect your answer to be rounded to the tenth. Okay? We will follow the directions. It's important. You are going to decide which method works for you. I'm not going to make you use both methods. You might like the proportion, you might like the equation. I highly recommend at the top of your paper writing down what they both are. Part equals percent times whole. Write it at the top for your equation so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. Write the proportion, part over whole equals percent over 100. Write it at the top of the paper so we don't have to flip back and forth. Let's do this first one together. We are going to label all of our pieces in the word problem so we know which numbers are what. Your bookshelf has 150 books in it. 20% are on the top shelf, 50% are on the middle shelf, 30% are on the bottom shelf. How many books are on each shelf? So this is a multi-step problem. What do you think we have to do to solve it? What do you think, Luke?
So we have to find what 20% of 150 is, and 50% of 150, and 30% of 150 first.
Exactly. We have to find the top shelf, then we have to find the middle shelf, then we have to find that bottom shelf. We have to do our math 3 different times to figure out how many books are on each shelf. So your final answer, you're gonna have on the top shelf is this many books, on the middle shelf is this many books, and on the bottom shelf is that many books. So we're gonna have to do that math for each shelf. So let's take this one shelf at a time. Your bookshelf has 150 books on it. 20% are on the top shelf. How many books are on that top shelf? What is my part? What is my whole? What is my percent? Eleanor?
Your whole is 150 books.
So I'm going to put a W over it. So I remember that's my whole.
And then 20% is the percent. And then 50% is the percent.
Oh, no. We're just
Oh,
doing
we're
the
doing-
top shelf
okay.
right now.
And then how many books on each shelf is the part.
How many books is that that's on that top shelf is my part. So no matter which shelf we're doing, the 20% or the top shelf, the middle shelf, the bottom shelf, our percent is changing, but our whole number stays the same and the part stays the same. Okay? So we're doing it 3 times with 3 different percents. The whole and the part will stay the same. Well, the P. Okay, and obviously, the number of books on each shelf is going to change, but the P is what we're solving for each shelf. So, how can I solve the top shelf? Who can tell me what to write? What do you think, Graham?
150 times 0.2.
What am I missing? Because I have to have a variable that I'm solving for. If it's an equation, it has to have that equal sign. You have to put in that variable. What am I solving for? So what is 150 times 0.2? Michael?
30.
So over here, I'm saying that's my top shelf. I'm going to put my answer in. Who can set up for the middle shelf? Eleanor?
P equals 150 times 0.5.
So that 50% is 0.5. What is 150 times 0.5, Robbie?
75.
So now I can come over here and I can put the middle shelf in. Who can set up that bottom shelf for me? Beckett.
P equals 150 times 0.3.
What is 150 times 0.3? Harper.
45.
You said 45?
Yep.
What can I do to check my answer? Natalie?
Add them up.
Add all 3 of those up. What should it equal? 150. So if I add all 3 of these up, it's going to logically make sense if it equals 150, right? I can also look and see 50% for the middle shelf is the biggest percentage, it should be the biggest number. Top shelf is 20%, bottom shelf is 30%, 20% is my smallest percentage, it should be my smallest number. Different things you can look at to check your work, make sure it's logically making sense. Okay. You're going to be working through seeing what steps you have to do. Some of these are multi-step, like this. Some of them are a little more straightforward. There are 2 pages of word problems because word problems take up a lot of space. It's not a lot of equations to do because they're word problems. Is this due tomorrow? No, because we are correcting on Monday. So tomorrow is our work day. If you're one of my friends saying, I don't have any retakes to do, I know I might want to do Khan Academy because there's going to be new Khan Academy assignments tomorrow. What I highly recommend you doing is working through as much as you can. If there's ones that you're having trouble with, put a star next to it. Skip it and move on. Do the easy ones. Tomorrow in class, the ones that you starred, come ask me. Does somebody have orchestra lesson right now? Is it Harper? Okay, tomorrow is a work day. So if there's ones that you're struggling with, just put a star next to it. Don't spend 2 hours trying to figure it out today, because we're not correcting tomorrow. You could ask questions and we can do some working it out a bit for any of the tricky ones. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so quiet work time now. If you are watching this video at home, I hope you are well and I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day. It is a quiet work time.